Hope everybody's doing well tonight. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now the correct wrong behavior, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. So I want to go through these topics here. We'll give an update on what's going on with coronavirus, and we see that black and Hispanic children are much more likely to be hospitalized for COVID-19. Associated Press, this report came out this past week. Associated Press has a article dealing with this. Racial disparities in the U.S. Coronavirus epidemic extend to children, according to two sobering government reports released Friday. One of the Centers for Disease Control, and Prevention reports looked at children with COVID-19 who needed hospitalization. Now, Hispanic children were hospitalized at a rate 8 times higher than white children. Hispanic children were hospitalized at a rate 8 times higher than white children, and African American children were hospitalized at a rate 5 times higher than white children, the report found. Now, the second report examined cases of a rare virus-associated syndrome in children. It found that nearly 3/4 of the children with the syndrome were either Hispanic or black, well above their representation in the general population. The coronavirus has exposed racial fractures in the U.S. healthcare system, as African American, Hispanic, and Native Americans have been hospitalized and killed by COVID-19 at far higher rates than other groups. Now, meanwhile, the impact of the virus on children has become a political issue. Donald Trump and some other administration officials have been pushing schools to reopen, a step that would allow more parents to return to work and the economy to pick up. Now, this past Wednesday, Facebook deleted a post by Donald Trump for violating its policy against spreading misinformation about the coronavirus. The post featured a link to a Fox News video in which Donald Trump says children are virtually immune to the virus. Okay, the post featured a link to a Fox News video in which Donald Trump said children are virtually immune to the virus. Okay, which is false. That's a lie. Now, the vast majority of coronavirus cases and deaths have been in adults, and children are considered less likely to have serious symptoms when they are infected. Of the nearly 5 million cases reported in the U.S. as of Wednesday, this past Wednesday, about 265,000 were in children. Okay, of the 5 million reported cases, about 265,000 were in children 17 and under, which is about 5%. Of the more than 156,000 deaths reported at that time, 77 children, or about 0.05%, were children. But Friday's Center for Disease Control report are a gut punch reminder that some children are getting seriously ill and dying, said Carrie Henning-Smith, a University of Minnesota researcher who focuses on health disparities. She said it's clear from these studies and from other emerging research that children are not immune. Kids can pass along COVID-19, and they can also suffer the effects of it. Okay. Now, she said the study should give community leaders pause about opening schools. Quote, "We need to be really, really careful. We are potentially talking about putting children in unsafe situations," end quote, she said. Now, okay, so we're coming up here on a break. When we come back, we'll talk about this article from NBCnews.com. From Columbus to slavery, teachers are re-examining how history is taught. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF. This is Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, August 9th, 2020. Hope everybody's doing well. Give us a call, 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now, if you follow me on Facebook, you know I did a couple of posts dealing with the video that Cardi B put out August 7th called WAP, W-A-P. I'm not going to say what it stands for. You can Google it. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, my personal page, Michael Imhotep. And it's Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. And just so, for those who are confused, a stallion is a male horse that has not been castrated. Some of the responses, you know, were interesting and disturbing at the same time. And I talked about how I'm not going to go deep into this. I'm setting up a panel discussion with some intelligent African American women. So that's coming up sometime this week. I'm pulling everything together. It's going to be on Zoom. Email us at sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T to 22828. Sign up for our email newsletter. But I did a Facebook post, got a lot of response, some good, some bad. And there was an article from thegriot.com, okay, thegriot.com, that talked about the video, and let me see, I'm scrolling down to my actual post so I can get correct what I said. But I was talking about the negative corporate controlled hip-hop. You've heard me talk about that before, negative corporate controlled hip-hop, and how it's being promoted to our people, especially to our youth, to destroy us. And I asked the question, why is thought culture and stripper music being targeted to African Americans, especially African American girls? The hypersexualization of African Americans goes back to slavery, when orchestrated sexual assault took place to produce children for slave masters to enrich them. Who is really making money off the sexual exploitation of African American women today? And we can also say the sexual exploitation of African American men. Now, I've been dealing with this topic for about 10 years on my shows and lectures, things like this, so I haven't just addressed music from African American women, but also music from African American men, whether it's Lil Wayne, whether it's Rick Ross, whether it's the Migos. Okay, I've interviewed everybody from Professor Griff of Public Enemy to Speech, co-founder of Arrested Development, to Wise Intelligence of the Poor Righteous Teachers, to Brother Jay of the X-Clan, ISIS of the X-Clan. So I've talked about this a lot in the past. I didn't just start talking about it here. And in my critique and criticism, it's not an attack specifically on Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion. It's dealing with negative corporate-controlled hip-hop funded by white corporations targeting African Americans with destructive messages. That's what this is about. So the article from thegriot.com is Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion cause internet frenzy with release of WAP, W-A-P. And so I have a panel discussion coming up sometime this week, getting all that together. Read the article. If you follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, we have the post there. And also I have the link to the official music video, which has censored lyrics that's still raunchy. And then I have a video with the uncensored lyrics. And we have to understand how whatever is disseminated is imitated. and how your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results, and how people are controlled and targeted by negative messages put in imagery. All this is connected. And so we have to understand how all these pieces are coming together. All right, because this post here got like 199 comments, and I'm scrolling down to some of my comments. One of the things I was talking about was how when you listen to top 40 artists, I've talked about this before in some of my broadcasts. If you go watch an hour of music videos on BET Jams, then go watch an hour of music videos of top 40 music on MTV, or if Fuse is still around in some markets, Fuse TV, you would think you're on a different planet if you look at the difference in the subject matter in those music videos. Now, we're still in the same country, and these same record companies that have hip-hop artists and these corporate conglomerates also have white artists, white top 40 artists. When you listen to the white artists, you're largely, in general, you're going to hear, so not white hip-hop artists, but just like the white top 40 artists, okay? Billboard top 40 artists. When you listen to their music and you watch the music videos, you're largely, in general, going to hear themes dealing with love, relationships, marriage, different things like that. In general, there's some exceptions here and there. There's going to be less emphasis on violence, less emphasis on drugs, less emphasis on alcohol consumption. And in general, in a lot of the music, so if we contrast that with a lot of the hip-hop that we hear, from negative corporate control hip-hop, I'm not talking about conscious hip-hop artists, I'm talking about, speaking of the negative corporate control hip-hop, you're likely to hear themes promoting promiscuity, promoting drug usage, promoting violence, less emphasis on love, less emphasis on relationships, especially healthy relationships, less emphasis on marriage. Now, yeah, there are exceptions here and there, but I'm talking about, look at the themes. There's more emphasis on material things when we listen to corporate control negative hip-hop. There's more emphasis on material things. There's more emphasis on money. And when you watch the imagery in the videos, when you watch the white top 40 videos, you're going to see, you're not going to see a lot of them with money falling from the sky and stacks of money and things like this. There may be one here or there, but you're going to see a larger proliferation of it when you look at the videos of African American hip hop artists being targeted to our youth. Now, yeah, white youth watch hip hop and things like this, but you know, in general, they have more of a support system around them, so they have more options. For them, a lot of what they're seeing is fantasy for them. Okay? So we have to ask the question, why are these messages being marketed to our youth? Why are these messages being marketed to African Americans? Why do we see the dehumanization of African Americans repeatedly in negative corporate controlled hip hop? Because when we look at the white artists in top 40 music and you look at those videos, you don't see the dehumanization to the degree that you see it in our music. Now, the artists are signed to the same record labels, or in some cases they may have a hip-hop label, but they're still owned by the same parent company. So you have to ask the question, well, why is it a different standard, for a higher standard for white artists than it is for African American artists? Because I challenge you to find me a top white artist who's won Grammys and things like this, right? That puts out a song with lyrics similar to WAP. You're not going to find a Taylor Swift. You're not going to find a Taylor Swift. You're not going to find any of these other artists. They may have a raunchy song here and there. Ain't nothing like this. So some people said, well, this is, so I had some women commenting, and some of them I had to unfriend. Don't give me I don't give a damn. Look, let me explain something to you. I got over 1,000 friend requests. I have over 1,000 friend requests on my personal Facebook page waiting for me to accept. So, whatever, it is what it is. This is the same thing I've been saying for 10 years. So what I find interesting, and we're going to dig into this, get deep into this in the panel discussion that I'm organizing, is that some African American women said the song was sexually liberating for African American women because women are talking about enjoying sex. But also in the same song, they're talking about prostitution. They're basically talking about having sex in exchange for money. Is that sexually liberating? Are we promoting? So let's look at this. Let's put this in context. Because I had this conversation with somebody, a woman I know who's close to me. And she and others were saying it's sexually liberating for women and things like this. And women are taking control of their sexuality and what have you. Taking control of it and doing what? So some people said that Cardi B is being sexually empowered. This is big, and Megan Thee Stallion. This is bigger than the two of them. It'd be different if they shot a video and watched it in the privacy of their own home. This is a video that has a production budget to make the video by a white corporation. This is put out by, the song is put out by Atlantic Records. It is, they have a budget, they have a budget to make the song from Atlantic Records. They have a budget to produce the video. Then they have a budget for the marketing team to market the song. All of that. That's dollars from a white corporation pushing this message through to African American women. Now, the video was viewed 25 million times in one day on Cardi B's YouTube channel alone. So this is, see, we don't understand when we're under attack. And oftentimes we will confuse people. We don't understand white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works. So I'm going to research this. We need to look at who were the people who signed off on this. People had to approve the song, approve the lyrics. The song is on 7-inch vinyl, digital download, cassette tape. So that's a budget that was approved to produce all of that. So oftentimes we don't understand what's behind the scenes and the dollars that are fueling the messages, the dollars that are funding the messages. We think this is about two people. No, it's not. Video has been viewed about 47 million times in 2 days. If we don't understand how we are under attack, how do we defend against the attack? How do we protect our children from the attack if we don't understand we are under attack? So then I pulled up an article that I talked about before. This is from TheRoot.com from August 20th, 2015. Go read this article. Nicki Minaj wax figure reduces famous rapper to famous rump. Nicki Minaj, wax figure, reduces famous rapper to famous rump. Now, in the lecture I did in 2015, I think it was. I think it's either 2015, 2016. Empire Strikes Black, the propaganda of the media. I talked about the TV show Empire. I also talked about Nicki Minaj's song Anaconda. Now, this wasn't an attack on Nicki Minaj. This is understanding how we are under attack and how a lot of these artists, they may be very good people, but they are being used against us. So when we fight back, it's not a fight against the artists. It's a fight against the corporate conglomerates that are using the artists, that are misusing the artists. So we have to be clear. The attack, when we attack, is not against Cardi B. The attack is not against Rick Ross. The attack is not against the artists. The attack is against the corporate conglomerates, the white people who are controlling the artists and fueling the negative messages. So when you read this article from theroot.com, it's very important. I want you all to read this, share this with your children, your grandchildren. This article talks about Nicki Minaj got a statue at the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Okay? It's famous wax museum. And let me go here to the article. Nicki Minaj was recently honored with a statue at the Las Vegas venue of the famous Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Apparently realizing that some know her as much for her looks as for her lyrics, the museum opted to pose the Nicki Minaj figure in a way that almost leveled her face with her behind. So if you go watch the Anaconda video, if you want to watch it, okay, it's explicit video. It's not as explicit as WAP, but it's explicit video. In the video, they show her bent over on all fours. Well, that's the position that they have her in for her wax statue. Bent over all fours, scantily clad. Okay? Now, to be fair, she approved the depiction of herself bent over on all fours, scantily clad, in this wax museum, which shows you her mentality, Nicki Minaj's mentality. Okay? She needs some help too. But one of the most troubling things is the article talked about how a number of patrons who came to see the statues groped the wax statue of Nicki Minaj, humped the wax statue, threw money at it, things like this. The museum, let's see. Let me go to that portion here. Okay, as offended as many are by the posing of the statue and the lewdness that followed, there doesn't seem to be any outrage from Nicki Minaj. What no one can reasonably deny is that Nicki Minaj distributed the image along with others that seem to focus on her behind while promoting Anaconda. Okay, so this is the image that's promoted in the video. When you read this article, they have a picture of an African-American woman standing behind Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is bent over. She's standing behind her, throwing money at her like Nicki Minaj is a stripper. What's happening is people are reacting to this wax statue that is depicting how Nicki Minaj oftentimes projects herself. I understand, I've been in radio a long time, I've met a lot of entertainers, met hip-hop artists, so I understand that oftentimes the image that is projected, the image that is actually created by the record label, is different than an actual person. I understand that. But a lot of people don't know that. And the way you made your money is by the image that is projected. Okay? And whatever is disseminated becomes imitated. And people treat you based upon the image that is projected, the persona that is projected. Okay? So, the article said, the pose itself recreates an image Nicki Minaj published in her own social media channels as a teaser for the video Anaconda. As with all people we immortalize in our attractions, her representatives were kept informed. Okay, so that's the museum. I want to go to the exact. Okay. So in response to the many photos of museum patrons, both men and women pretending to toss dollars at the wax statue, grope and penetrate the object. Now, they are reacting to a wax statue and treating it based upon the depiction of a black woman, an African-American woman in video. What happens when they see other African-American women and associate the way Nicki Minaj portrays herself in music videos with other African-American women and treat them accordingly? What happens when other African-American women or men, or African-Americans period, or other people see African-American women and associate African-American women with the depiction of African-American women in the video and treat them like the wax statue of Nicki Minaj was treated or mistreated? Because I spoke out against it hurt me to read about this and how African Americans were treating this wax statue of her. This is much deeper than we think it is. How do you defend against attacks when you don't understand you're being attacked? So when I do my panel discussion sometime this week, working out the details, and we'll talk about it on next Sunday's show, we're going to get deep into this because we don't understand the messaging of the media, the propaganda of the media. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Okay? Your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. This is why conscious hip-hop was taken over by negative corporate controlled hip-hop, and the whole movement is sent in a different direction because conscious hip-hop was elevating the conscious level of African American youth, teenagers, college students all across the country. We were wearing African medallions. We were reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. We were listening to Minister Farrakhan records. We were going to see lectures by Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. At the same time, you have the golden age of hip hop, and you have this have conscious hip hop, this Afrocentric movement in the conscious hip hop. You also have an Afrocentric movement of the scholars that I just mentioned, and Dr. Wade Nobles, and you had the TV show For the People that came out of South Carolina, hosted by Lister Belt Middleton, where he would interview these brothers and sisters every week. You had Dr. Marimba Ani, Dr. Naeem Akbar. All this is taking place at the same time, is elevating the conscious level of African American youth, the conscious level of African American teenagers and college students. And then we're getting involved in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and studying politics and studying international politics. And then we start having sit-ins on college campuses predominantly white college campuses, and HBCUs. And what are we demanding? Africana studies departments, because we're fueled by conscious hip-hop. Your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. Your thoughts are influenced by what you read, see, and hear. Your thoughts are influenced by what you read, see, and hear. Okay? So the question we have to ask is, who is in control of the information that is being disseminated to us that then influences our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and ultimately influences our behaviors? When you have low vibrational music that vibrates at a low level, that focuses on sex, promiscuity, things like this, it keeps you from elevating your conscious level, fighting back against white supremacy and racism. So what happens when you are being attacked through the music and you don't understand that you're being attacked? If you want to destroy a nation, you do it through the music, because the music hits the youth first. And the youth are the ones who are least prepared to defend against the attack. Oftentimes they don't even know they're being attacked. So this is what's taking place. And then oftentimes what happens is, so when, you have some people that say, oh, you're trying to police women's bodies and things like that. No. We have to also understand African American men are raising daughters. And what type of world are we raising our daughters in? How does media influence the minds of people that shapes their views of women, especially African American women? So read that article from TheRoot.com. Nicki Minaj, wax figure reduces rapper to famous rump. Read the article from TheGrio.com. Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion cause internet frenzy with release of WAP. And when I have my panel discussions, it's going to be deep. We're going to get deep into this. One of the things that people don't think about, and I've interviewed Bob Law. I interviewed Bob Law in 2019 for his Respect Us campaign that deals with cleaning up the airwaves. I interviewed, I've been on a panel discussion dealing with cleaning up the airwaves, things like this. We don't understand how the same record companies and the same corporations will have higher standards for white artists than African American artists, because they're not going to let a lot of these white artists put this type of music out because they understand the effect. We have to stop participating in our own dehumanization. We have to stop participating in our own dehumanization, because a lot of these corporations that put this music out get money from us. And the other thing is that a lot of people don't know is a lot of some of us, our pension funds are invested in some of these entertainment companies that put out negative corporate controlled hip-hop. So we're financing our own dehumanization and don't even realize it. Okay? Reverend Al Sharpton had an initiative some years ago to teach people how they were invested in a lot of these entertainment companies, a lot of these corporate conglomerates that put out negative corporate control hip-hop, and they're invested through their pension funds, and how to divest from them. Now, we know that a lot of people are invested in privatized prisons through their pension funds and 401k plans and don't know this. We saw in June of 2017, New York Daily News had an article dealing with this, how in the city of New York, city employees divested about $48 million from 3 privatized prisons: Core Civic, Geo Group, and G4S. Core Civic used to be Corrections Corporation of America. We are participating in our own dehumanization and don't even understand this. And don't understand how our dollars are being used against us. Okay? So when we look at top 40 music, we're going to see that the themes have more, there's going to be less emphasis on violence, less emphasis on materialism, things like this, right? So people may say, well, there's, so when we see that there's more emphasis on violence in music targeting African Americans, we have to ask the question, why? Because if you look, Scientific American.com had a report that came out a couple of years ago that talked about how there are approximately 300 million guns in the U.S. 78% of the U.S. population don't own any guns. 50% of the guns are owned by 3% of the U.S. population, and that is overwhelmingly white males owning guns. So if we look at who owns the guns, it's overwhelmingly white people, especially white males. So it's not that white people don't have guns. It's not that they don't have crime in their communities. It's not that they don't experience poverty. So we have to ask the question, well, wait a second, why are messages dealing with criminality and violence more prevalent in African American, especially negative corporate controlled hip hop, than in white music? When they have crime in their communities, they have violence in their communities, they have more guns than we do. So why is there a discrepancy in the messaging, in the imagery? So we have to, when we're being programmed, when we're being fed this programming, we have to understand this. And Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers, talks about how whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, your self-development, and your self-worth. Whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, your self-development, and your self-worth. Okay? Whoever controls the messaging, whoever controls the history, controls the messaging. All right? So we have to understand this empowers the ability to define and shape reality and have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own. So we have to understand how we are under attack. Okay, this is why Public Enemy was such a powerful group. They had a song, Fight the Power. You know, when we listen to Public Enemy, and they're talking about fighting the power, they're talking about educating yourself, they're talking about black empowerment and black pride, things like this. And we're studying our history, listening to Public Enemy. And they had a song called By the Time I Get to Arizona, which talked about the state of Arizona not recognizing the Dr. King holiday. Okay, this was all music that was uplifting us, uplifting our conscious level. And if we go back and listen to a lot of the music from the 1960s and Motown music, things like this, one, you have music fueling the civil rights movement and fueling the black power movement. But two, when we listen to a lot of music from that time, and even though you're going to have a small percentage that was negative, but a lot of music focused on love, relationships, things like that. Some was dealing with consciousness, what's going on, Marvin Gaye, I'm Black and I'm Proud, James Brown, okay? But you had music that was focusing on love and relationships and marriage. Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. You listen to the Supremes, you listen to the Temptations, My Girl, etc. Okay? So you have a totally different change in the messaging. And then we look at, in negative corporate controlled hip hop, we look at the promotion and marketing heavily of the usage of marijuana, heavily the usage of alcohol. And then when we look in white music, we don't see that presence as prevalent. But if we look at studies that deal with the usage of marijuana, for instance, African Americans and white people use marijuana basically at the same rates. Why is there more of a proliferation of it being promoted in our music than their music? Because whatever is disseminated becomes imitated. And if you want to destroy a nation, you do it through the music, because the music hits the youth first, and the youth have less of a defense mechanism built up because they're younger. I wrote an article about 2 or 3 years ago. There was a TED Talk by a white pastor named White Mike. And he did a TED Talk that was dealing with negative corporate controlled hip-hop and how messages of African Americans killing themselves are in the music. And one of the things he talked about is how you can make, he said you can't make a hip-hop song about killing a dog, but you can make a hip-hop song about killing black men, black people, African Americans. So you have to sit back and think, well, why are dogs more protected than African Americans? Whatever is disseminated becomes imitated. Why are dogs more protected than African Americans? Because if you try to make a song about killing a dog, PETA is going to come after you. Okay, the animal rights organization, they're going to come after you. You're going to have other people coming after you as well. Okay, who are going to say that's wrong? You can't do that. Pull that off the shelf. But you can have a song, you can have CDs full of songs talking about beating up African Americans, killing African Americans, dehumanizing us, and it's no problem. I remember YourBlackWorld.net had an article, and I posted it a couple of times on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. This is a few years ago. Nicki Minaj had a song called Only. And in the video, it had the depiction of an emblem that looked similar to a Nazi swastika. And there was a group in the video that was wearing a uniform with the emblem on it. And it was similar to Nazi swastika. It wasn't a Nazi swastika. But Jewish organizations spoke out against this. She issued an apology to them. Okay? She issued an apology to them. But she didn't issue an apology to African Americans for using the N-word in the same song. She talked about how sorry she was and didn't mean to offend, but she didn't issue an apology to African Americans for using the N-word in the very same song. So you see one group has higher standards than another group. One group speaks out and say, no, you ain't going to disrespect us, even if you didn't mean it. Another group largely oftentimes just accepts it. Then you have some people who say, because I heard this argument as well, these negative lyrics is nothing new. That's been going on for a long time. They had blues songs in the 1940s and 30s and 50s and things like this. That's nothing new. When you say something like that's nothing new, that is tacitly, subconsciously just accepting and approving what's taking place that we know is wrong. Because we say that's been going on for a long time. Well, when are we going to stop it? We're just going to accept it, and then the next generation has to deal with the same thing? Because when we look at what's taking place, it's getting worse. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. So we're just going to say, oh, well, that's been going on the 80s and the 90s and NWA, and you had Ice-T, and you had these groups, and then you had BWP, B's with Problems, and HWA, H's with Attitudes, and you had the Two Live Crew. So we had this back then, so they have this now. So we're not going to do better for our children than was done for us? Is that how we try to rationalize this and accept our own dehumanization? So if we're not going to protect our children, maybe we should stop having children. Because other ethnic groups don't tolerate things like this. If we're not going to stand up and protect our children, why should we keep having children? We're not going to protect their future and the messaging towards them, because other people are not going to allow their dollars to be used against them like that. We go and we look at it's about 1995. Michael Jackson had the song "They Don't Really Care About Us," and there was a passage where there's a couple of lines that Jewish organizations said were derogatory towards Jews. What happened? Did they just say, "Oh, well, this has been going on"? Negative statements about Jews been going on for a long time. This is nothing new, so we're just going to accept it. That's not what they did. I've been to the ADL's website. They still have articles there talking about this. They put pressure on Sony. Sony was Michael Jackson's record company at the time. Sony took off every last one of those CDs off the shelf, removed the lyrics that Jewish organizations said were derogatory, and then put the CD back on the shelf. It wasn't the entire song that had negative statements allegedly about Jews. Michael Jackson didn't mean anything negatively about it, negatively towards the Jewish community. He didn't mean anything negatively towards them. It wasn't an entire song. It wasn't an entire CD. It was a couple lines in a song. Yet there were CDs on the same shelves that dehumanized African Americans, called us N-words and B's and things like this, talked about killing us. Those CDs were allowed to stay. Why are other groups protected and African Americans are the only ones who you can say anything about and put out explicit derogatory lyrics at this type, backed by white corporate dollars that market it? A single, not just a song on the CD, a single release, marketed, marketing dollars behind it, production dollars to make a video. Ice-T had a Ice-T had a heavy metal band called Body Count. Okay, and this was back in the 90s. This was back in the 90s. Body Count, and he had a song. He had a song that on called "Cop Killer." Okay, and the song "Cop Killer." People say, yeah, it was 1995. There was a History album that Michael Jackson had the song "They Don't Really Care About Us," 1995. So he had a song called "Cop Killer," and police unions across the country came out in opposition to this song, saying that he was talking about doing harm to police officers. Okay, and he said he was talking about corrupt officers, but police unions across the country came out in opposition about this. His record company at the time was Warner Brothers, and it's Warner Brothers and Time Warner. So what happened? Did they say, "Oh, well, this is nothing new"? Did they say, "Oh, this has been going on for years"? No, they put pressure on Warner Brothers. What did Warner Brothers do? Warner Brothers pulled every last one of those CDs off the shelves and did not put it back up, did not put that CD back out. And then consequently, Ice-T sold his stocks that he had in Time Warner. When you go study this, other groups are protected except for African Americans. So we have to ask the question, why? The reason why is because you only protect what you respect. You only protect what you respect. You use negative, pejorative terms to dehumanize people, to relabel people, to change the way people think towards a targeted group, to then justify the mistreatment of those people. When you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, she talks about it. I have the book here somewhere. I have 5 stacks of books here, so forgive me. But when you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, she talks about cognitive dissonance and how you relabel people and put negative pejorative terms on people to then justify their mistreatment, because otherwise you wouldn't mistreat them like that, because you would not want to be treated like that. It absolves yourself of any guilt that you have. So it's all right to mistreat H's. It's all right to mistreat whores or what have you, because you don't elevate. You don't put them on a pedestal. You don't elevate them. So it's all right to relabel them and mistreat them like that. So what happens when a targeted group, targeted with negative messages, starts to believe the hype and starts to internalize those negative messages? Power is the ability to define and shape reality and have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own. So this is why we have to take our minds back. The foundation, when Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small and myself teach, because they're 2 of my teachers, we talk about the pyramid principle. The foundation is African history and culture. It's our history and culture that gives us our values, our interests, and our principles. Our values, our interests, and our principles. That gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. It influences our economic and political empowerment. As Dr. Marimba Ani talks about, who wrote the book Yorugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. Dr. Marimba Ani, this is a brilliant sister. She talks about how our culture gives us an immune system that protects us from others coming in trying to harm us. So this is what we have to understand. We have to take our minds back. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Okay, so the next story I want to go to, NBCnews.com broke this story early in the week. This was from about August 7th. Facebook removes troll farm posing as African American support for Donald Trump. Facebook removes troll farm posing as African American support for Donald Trump. Now this ties back into what we saw in the 2016 campaign and the Russian Internet Research Agency creating fake personas on social media, putting out pro-Trump statements and putting out negative Hillary Clinton statements. News1.com also picked up this story in an article. Facebook, fake black people vote for Trump account is part of huge takedowns by Facebook. If we look at the reporting from NBCnews.com, Facebook removed hundreds of accounts on Thursday, which was August 6th, I think it was. Facebook removed hundreds of accounts on Thursday from a foreign troll farm posing as African Americans in support of Donald Trump and QAnon supporters. QAnon is idiotic conspiracy theory, QAnon. It also removed hundreds of fake accounts linked to conservative media outlet, the Epoch Times, EPOCH, the Epoch Times, that pushed pro-Trump conspiracy theories about coronavirus and protests in the U.S. So there's this disinformation campaign that's being used on social media, especially on Facebook, to create fake African American profiles They're putting out these negative messages. You see it, and you think you're talking to somebody African American. No, and it's somebody at a troll farm. Okay? Now, the foreign pro-Trump troll farm was based in Romania and pushed content on Instagram under names like Black People Vote for Trump and on Facebook under We Love Our President. So if you subscribe to any of those pages and then all of a sudden you see it wasn't there anymore, that's why. Now, troll farms, you may ask, what is a troll farm? Troll farms are groups of people that work together to manipulate internet discourse with fake accounts and often outsourced and purchased by foreign governments or businesses to purchase specific political talking points. So you're on a Facebook page or you have a Facebook friend and they're sending you this information, posting these memes, and these memes are stating things as facts but don't cite any sources, don't provide any sources, and you think you're dealing with somebody who's legitimate and they're actually from a troll farm. They're fake and they're not African American. So Nathaniel Gleicher, Gleicher, is Facebook's head of security policy, and he said that the troll farm's motivations were unclear, but they did not see, quote, clear evidence of financial motivation, end quote, or, quote, clear links to known commercial actors in this space, end quote. Now, Facebook stressed that the takedowns of these pages and personas were based on, quote, behavior, not content. Behavior, not content, end quote. Like breaking rules against creating fake accounts to boost engagement on some pieces of content. Researchers at the Atlantic Council found that many of the troll farms posts came from a persona called David Adrian, A-D-R-I-A-N, David Adrian, which used a stolen profile photo and claimed to be living in both Romania and Montana. Those are two different countries. Montana's in the U.S., okay? Now, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have removed multiple accounts for the David Adrian persona. Now, a separate troll operation tied to pro-Trump media organization Epoch Media Group, EPOCH, featured 303 Facebook accounts, 181 Facebook pages, and 44 Facebook groups, and 31 Instagram accounts. Okay, let me repeat this. A separate troll operation tied to pro-Trump media organization Epoch Media Group featured 303 Facebook accounts. So these are Facebook personas. 181 Facebook pages, they're like fan pages. 44 Facebook groups and 31 Instagram accounts. These were followed by more than 2 million people across both services. Or all the services. Yeah, all the pages combined through both services were followed by more than 2 million people. Now, Epoch Media Group is the parent company of the newspaper, the Epoch Times. The accounts were tied to a digital media outlet called Truth Media, which Facebook says it has banned from its services. Now, the accounts posted about, quote, ongoing U.S. protests and conspiracy theories about who is behind them, Nathaniel Gleicher said. Some accounts pushed health misinformation about COVID-19, which led to their ban from their services before this month's takedown, before the takedown in August. Now, Stephen Gregory, publisher of the Epoch Times, English language editions, denied that the company was associated with Truth Media, the Truth Media organization. He said the Epoch Times and Epoch Media Group are not in any way linked or related with Truth Media, nor do we have any involvement in any operation of Truth Media, he said in the email. Now, the same network appears to have created a still active White House petition to, quote, start calling the novel coronavirus CCP virus, according to an investigation by Graphika, Graphika, which tracks disinformation on social media. Now, Facebook has twice taken action against Epoch Times related content, most recently for its use of AI generated or artificial intelligence generated deep fake style profile pictures on fake accounts that pushed Epoch Times stories and talking points. Nathaniel Gleicher, head of security for Facebook, head of security policy for Facebook, he said that the news Epoch Media Group related fake accounts primarily use stock photos and not artificial intelligence generated photos for profile pictures. Now, Facebook has banned the Epoch Times from advertising on its platform last year after it purchased ads under account names like Honest Paper and Pure Honest Journalism to get around the social media network's ad revenue systems. At the time, the Epoch Times was the largest buyer of pro-Trump ads on Facebook outside of the Trump campaign. At the time, the Epoch Times was the largest buyer of pro-Trump ads on Facebook outside of the pro-Trump campaign. An example of the new Epoch Media related takedown provided by Facebook showed an account called Truth14, Truth the number 14, pushing a meme about a baseball player who did not kneel during the national anthem. Part of the account's strategy to push pro-Trump culture war messaging. Part of the account's strategy to push pro-Trump culture war messaging. Quote, this guy is going to need a lot of support because the mob is coming for him and his family, end quote, the Post reads. MLB, Major League Baseball, MLB is BLM spelled backwards, Black Lives Matter. So this is this meme pushed by this fake account. Now, an earlier version of this article misstated how many accounts connected to the Epoch Times were removed from Facebook. It was about 300 accounts, not thousands. That was an earlier report. It was 300 accounts removed by Facebook of the Epoch Times. Is 303 Facebook accounts. And then News1.com has an article about this as well. Fake black people vote for Trump account is part of huge takedowns by Facebook. Okay, so check that out as well. We also saw this past week the job numbers came out Thursday. We saw that, we saw the unemployment numbers came out Thursday, and then we saw the job numbers came out Friday. The economy added 1.8 million jobs. So this is basically people returning back to jobs they already had. 1.8 million. The U.S. economy added 1.8 million jobs during the month of July, sending the unemployment rate down for the third straight month, a drop that fell in line with economists' predictions and pointed to the recovery that began before infection started ticking up. Now, when you read the report, it also talks about the recovery slowing down. The jobs additions were sizable, but there are signs that the labor market recovery has cooled or slowing down. In May, the first month of gains after the pandemic sent the economy into a tailspin, 2.7 million people were added back to payrolls. In June of 2020, employment surged by 4.8 million. The number of coronavirus cases began rising in June, surging to around 70,000 cases diagnosed in one day by mid-July, more than twice as much in the previous in its previous peak. Okay, so you can check this out, and we know that about on Thursday, about 1.2 million people filed for unemployment for the first time from the previous week as well. Okay, so we still have about 32, 33 million people unemployed. This is not getting better. This is not getting better. Also, this past week, August 7th, New York Times broke this story. Russia continues interfering in an election to try to help Trump, U.S. intelligence says. Russia is using a range of techniques to denigrate Joe Biden, American intelligence officials said Friday, in their first public assessment that Moscow continues to try to interfere in the 2020 campaign to help Donald Trump win re-election. At the same time, the official said China preferred that Donald Trump be defeated in November and was weighing whether to take more aggressive action in the election. But officials briefed on the intelligence said that Russia was the far graver and more immediate threat. While China seeks to gain influence in American politics, its leaders have not yet decided to wade directly into the presidential contest, however much they dislike Donald Trump, the official said. Now, the assessment, which was included in a statement released by William R. Evanina, Evanina, who is the director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, suggested the intelligence community was treading carefully, reflecting the political heat generated by previous findings. Now, the White House has objected in the past to conclusions that Moscow is working to help Donald Trump, and Democrats on Capitol Hill have expressed growing concern that the intelligence agencies are not being forthright enough against Russia's preference for Donald Trump, and that the agencies are introducing China's anti-Trump stance to balance the scales. The assessment appeared to draw a distinction between what it called the, quote, range of measures, end quote, being deployed by Moscow to influence the election, and its conclusion that China prefers that Donald Trump be defeated. Incited efforts coming out of pro-Russia forces in Ukraine to damage Joe Biden and Kremlin-linked figures who, quote, are also seeking to boost Trump's candidacy on social media and Russian television, end quote. Now, China, it said, has so far signaled its position mostly through increased public criticism of the administration's tough line on China on a variety of fronts. An American official briefed on the intelligence said it was wrong to equate the two countries. Russia, the official said, is a tornado capable of inflicting damage on American democracy now. China is more like climate change, the official said. The threat is real and grave, but more long-term. Now, Democratic lawmakers made the same point about the report, which also found that Iran was seeking, quote, to undermine U.S. democratic institutions, President Trump, and to divide the country, end quote, ahead of the general election. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Adam Schiff, who's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, said in a joint statement, quote, unfortunately, today's statement still treats three actors of different intent and capability as equal threats to our democratic elections. Okay? Unfortunately, today's statement still treats three actors of differing intent and capability as equal threats to our democratic elections. Now, asked about the report during the news conference on Friday night at his golf club in New Jersey, Donald Trump said, quote, the last person Russia wants to see in office is Donald Trump because nobody's tougher on Russia than I have been. That's a lie. He said that if Mr. Biden won the presidency, China would own the country. That's a lie also. Now, aides and allies of Joe Biden assailed Donald Trump, saying that he had repeatedly sided with President Vladimir Putin on whether Russia had interfered to help him win in 2016, and that he had been impeached by the House of Representatives for trying to pressure Ukraine into helping him undercut Joe Biden. Now, Tony Blinken is a senior advisor for Joe Biden, and he said in a statement, quote, Donald Trump has publicly and repeatedly invited, emboldened, and even tried to coerce foreign interference in American elections. Okay, so check out the rest of this article from New York Times from August 7th, 2020, written by Julian E. Barnes. Russia continues interfering in election to try to help Trump, U.S. intelligence says. So you have to be careful where you get your information on social media from. All right? All right, so in the remaining time we have left, let's deal with this last article here. NBCnews.com. Freak. From Columbus to slavery. From Columbus to slavery, teachers are re-examining how history is taught. Educators from around the country have been reflecting on what they teach and how they teach it in the wake of the death of George Floyd and the national protests that followed. Some lessons up for reconsideration are the dismissive take that it was simply, quote, the norm, end quote, that Presidents George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves in the late 1700s, and language around Christopher Columbus' discovering of America, quote unquote, discovering. Okay. Now, Stephanie Wager, W-A-G-E-R, I guess, or Wagger, a former teacher in Des Moines, Iowa, who is president of the National Council for Social Studies, said, quote, your messaging that people were not here thousands of years before Columbus, your messaging that people were not here thousands of years before Columbus, she said. Now, as the nation faces a moment of racial reckoning, many long-held conceptions are being challenged, as seen in the toppling of Confederate monuments and the push to, quote unquote, defund the police. Now, we talked about defund the police before, and basically what we're talking about is reducing the responsibilities of police and reallocating resources. Reducing responsibilities and reallocating resources. What's taught in U.S. classrooms is no exception. NBC News spoke with teachers around the country who said they are working to reshape lesson plans to better reflect the fullness of America's multicultural history. Additions to history classes might include lessons on intersectional figures such as Bayard Rustin, according to the article, the African-American man who organized the 1963 March on Washington but was largely shunned in the civil rights movement because he was gay. Also, I encourage people to read download the document from the Southern Poverty Law Center, splcenter.org, Teaching Hard History American Slavery, Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It documents how the history of slavery is being mistaught in schools across the country, and it gives numerous recommendations to more correctly teach the history of slavery. You can use this as you're teaching your children at home. Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight. You can donate to the African History Network, $, TheAHNShow through Cash App, $, TheAHNShow through Cash App, PayPal.me/TheAHNShow through PayPal. Remember, at the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. Peace.